Most people see medieval swords and armor as symbols of battle. But the truth is, every weapon held hidden secrets. Blacksmiths worked quietly in their forges, shaping blades with methods they rarely shared. Behind every edge and every curve were choices that could change the outcome of a fight. What looked like simple steel often carried tricks, meanings, and designs known only to the man who forged it. Number 1. The hidden art of forging. When most people think about a medieval blacksmith, they imagine the glowing forge, the ringing hammer, and sparks flying in the dark workshop. That picture is real, but what usually gets overlooked is how much quiet knowledge went into every weapon. A blacksmith was not just making something sharp. He was balancing strength, flexibility, and durability in ways that few outsiders understood. The real secrets of forging lived in the hands and the eyes of the smith. One of the most important hidden skills was tempering. A sword that looked deadly on the outside could be useless if the heat treatment was wrong. If a blade was cooled too quickly or too slowly, it could either snap like glass or bend out of shape in the middle of combat. To prevent that, smiths learned to read the color of hot metal as it glowed in the fire. They did not have thermometers, so the red, orange, and even faint blue tints of steel told them when to quench it in water or oil. Getting that moment right made the difference between life and death for the knight who trusted that blade. Another guarded method was layering metals. A common trick was to weld a hard edge onto a softer body, giving the weapon both sharpness and flexibility. Some swords and axes were built this way, combining iron that could take shock with steel that could hold an edge. This blending created weapons that lasted longer in battle, but the process was not easy to copy. Smiths passed these secrets carefully from master to apprentice, often making them swear never to reveal the techniques to outsiders. Even simple-looking weapons like spears or arrowheads had hidden details. A spear tip might look like plain iron, but the smith could add a thin steel layer to help it pierce armor. An arrowhead could be hardened differently, depending on whether it was meant to hunt animals or to cut through mail. These subtle adjustments were not written down. They were learned by years of watching, trying, and sometimes failing. Trust in a blacksmith was as valuable as trust in a shield. A knight often relied on the same smith for years, because only that craftsman knew exactly how he liked his weapons balanced. On a muddy battlefield, when hundreds of men clashed, the soldier whose blade kept its edge or whose spear did not shatter often had the upper hand. Behind the noise of war, the real foundation was being laid quietly in the forge, in the glow of fire, in the hidden timing of heat and hammer strikes. Number 2. Secret designs and symbolism. Weapons in the Middle Ages were never just pieces of metal. They carried hidden meanings, personal touches, and design choices that were not always obvious to the eye. Blacksmiths often marked their work with small signs placed near the base of the blade or inside the guard. These marks were not only proof of the maker, but also gave a sense of reliability to the knight who used the weapon. A soldier could recognize the mark and know the quality he was holding in his hand. Many smiths also added small crosses, runes, or short words that had spiritual value. In a world where people strongly believed in divine protection, these quiet details could bring a sense of comfort before going into a dangerous fight. The shape of the weapon itself often carried hidden ideas. A fuller, the groove that runs down the length of many swords, is often mistaken for something made to let blood flow. In reality, it was a clever design feature. It reduced the weight of the blade while keeping the strength, which meant the sword could be moved faster without losing its ability to cut. Other details, like the size and shape of the pommel, were also adjusted carefully. A heavy pommel at the end of the grip balanced the weapon and made it easier to handle. These decisions were not random. They were chosen for balance and control, giving the fighter an advantage in the middle of battle. Edges and points carried their own secrets. Some swords had slightly rounded edges, so they stayed sharp longer, while others included a sharpened section at the back near the tip, allowing for sudden cuts in close combat. Spears and axes also used mixed metal designs. A spear tip might hide a thin strip of harder steel along the edge, while the center was softer iron that absorbed shock. An axe could look like simple iron, but a steel edge welded in place gave it power to cut through shields or helmets. None of these features were obvious unless you knew what to look for. Symbolism also appeared in decoration, though it was usually modest. Guards, pommels, and scabbards sometimes carried small family crests, religious signs, or even simple patterns that linked a knight to his lord or region. These marks were not just for show. They reinforced identity and loyalty, and they reminded a fighter that he carried more than just a blade. In some cases, knights even placed a charm or a small prayer inside their scabbard, hidden from everyone else but always with them in battle. These touches gave the weapon meaning beyond its steel, combining craftsmanship with belief and turning a tool of war into something deeply personal. Number 3. The business of secrecy. Medieval weapon making was a trade, a science, and a guarded business all at once. A good smith did not only sell metal, he sold confidence, reputation, and time saved on the battlefield. Lords wanted that advantage, so the best craftsmen worked under contracts that tied their skills to one household or one city. Many shops belonged to guilds that set rules for training, prices, and quality, and those rules always protected trade secrets. An apprentice learned in small steps. For the first years he swept floors, kept the fire steady, and watched. Only later did he handle blades and learn the timing of heat and quench. The final tricks, like the exact oil blend for hardening or the tempering heat for a certain edge, were taught last and only to a trusted worker. Oaths were common because a leaked method could cost a family its income. Marks on blades did more than show pride. They acted like a brand in the modern sense. Buyers looked for a known mark before paying a higher price. Guilds punished fakes and copied stamps, because a false mark hurt the whole market. That is why many shops hid the mark under the guard, or near the tang, where only an owner or a fellow craftsman could find it. Secrecy also sat in the supply chain. Good steel needed steady access to charcoal, clean water, and quality iron. Forest rights and water rights were business assets, not just scenery. A forge near a stream could run water hammers and grindstones, and that speed meant more output when a lord called for new swords or piles of spearheads. During war, city councils sometimes reserved iron and charcoal for armorers and weaponsmiths first. Civil law and church rules also shaped the shop. Towns restricted night work because of fire risk. Some places limited who could produce military gear for export. Those limits kept skilled people from walking away with both knowledge and customers. Noble households added another layer by keeping a master smith on a retainer. Payment was not only coins. It could include housing, food, wood, and tax breaks, which made it even harder for rivals to lure a craftsman away. Inside the shop, secrecy looked practical. Recipes were kept in the head, not on paper. Quench tanks were covered. Oil was stored in plain jars. Journeymen mixed brine under the eye of the master and learned to judge heat by color and sound, not by written numbers. When a rival asked questions, the answer was often a half-truth, like blaming a result on special clay or a lucky fire. The market rewarded this silence. A blade that held up under rough use brought repeat orders and better fees. Elite clients paid for balance tuning, matched pairs, or custom edges for local armor styles, and they wanted those features kept quiet. At the same time, secrecy had limits. Armies needed volume, so many shops split tasks. One crew forged and rough ground. Another crew heat-treated. A third fit guards, grips, and pommels. Each team knew its slice, which protected methods and kept output steady. Quality control tied it all together. Proof marks after bend tests and file tests told buyers the piece had passed a standard. If a lot failed, the guild or the patron forced to do over at the smith's cost. That pressure made shop discipline tight. In the end, the business side explains why secrets lasted. Knowledge moved slowly on purpose, guarded by contracts, guilds, and family ties. The value was real. A weapon that flexed and sprang back did more than win a duel. It protected a banner, a border, and a patron's trust, which meant the next contract and the next winter's food for the people who worked the fire. Number 4. Legacy of the hidden craft. Medieval blacksmiths left a fingerprint in their weapons that we are still learning to read. Many workshop notes never survived, so modern knowledge comes from the blades themselves. Curators and metal experts look at tool marks, cross-sections, and tiny patterns in the steel to figure out what the smith did. Under a microscope, you can see traces of how the blade was heated and cooled. Some spots show hard phases that hint at a fast quench. Other zones look softer and tougher, which suggests careful tempering after the quench. These clues tell a story the smith never wrote down. They also explain why some swords bend and spring back, while others fail. The lesson is simple. Hidden steps in the shop shaped what happened on the battlefield. Another part of the legacy is branding. Famous names stamped on blades in earlier centuries built trust, and the idea carried into the later Middle Ages. A small mark near the hilt told buyers who made the weapon and what level of work to expect. That habit fed into guild systems and early quality control in towns with strong craft